Giant, Aquatic, Swamp, Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was 18, I didn't get along very well with my parents, and eventually one day, a friend of mine and I decided to run away to Spook Swamp in Pennsylvania and try to live off the land there. We had seen some movie about people living in the swamp, and to us living under the rule of stern parents, that looked like a perfect lifestyle. I'm pretty sure we would have chosen a different location if we had understood there was a giant dogman living there, larger than any bear I've ever seen. When we showed up at the swamp, after a day and a half of hiking, we only had about another day's worth of nuts and berries to subsist on, and we had a tent to sleep in. That's it. We had gone in with this notion of building ourselves a house on stilts in the water, like we had seen in some swamp movie on TV, but we had not brought plans or supplies with us. This was before cell phones and the internet, so it's not like we could sit there and Google the info. We really had no plan at all. We had no insect repellent either. We only had a vague vision. On what turned out to be our final day in the swamp, we were hiking when I saw the largest black bear in history in the swamp water in front of us. I grabbed my friend, who I'm going to call Kobe, and pulled him down with me behind a bush. From there, we both snuck peeks out at the creature. It had very dark fur, but looked more like a dog than a bear. Its ears were pointed and somewhat taller than a bear's ears. While we watched, the creature was staring intently into the water as it stood there on all fours, with the water about up to its knees. Suddenly, it flew into loud action, and white water flew in every direction. When things settled down, that bear was no longer down on all fours. Now, it was standing up and holding some kind of a fish in its right hand. Yes, I said hand. You can't hold a living, squirming fish in a paw. You need a thumb to grip it strongly enough so that it will not escape. That's what this big guy was doing. So therefore, he possessed some kind of hands. So the thing that I could now clearly see was not a bear, was upright and walking bipedally to the opposite shore. There he bashed the fish into a rock, then began eating what he'd caught. I'm saying he now instead of it, because I did not see anything feminine about this animal. Both Kobe and I were certain that this was a male animal that was bear-sized, but not actually a bear. When he was done eating, the not-a-bear walked bipedally back out into the water, then splashed down on all fours, and recommenced staring intently into the water, looking for another meal he could spear with the long talons at the ends of his fingers. I turned to suggest to Kobe that we get out of there before the huge dog-like man-thing smelled us on the wind. But when I turned, Kobe wasn't there. I looked around frantically and eventually discovered him running toward the swamp water and toward the feral dog-headed man. To be clear, just because its fur was dark, that does not mean that I'm saying it was merely the size of a black bear. This one was taller, more like a polar bear, although probably not quite as tall as that. Definitely this guy would have towered over any of the black bear that I've seen. So it was my assumption that Kobe was running to get closer so that he could get a photograph of the beast. He and I are both hugely interested in cryptids now, but he already was then. I was not yet, and I just wanted to get us to safety. I didn't really recognize the importance of recording a sighting of an as yet unproven animal, but I did recognize that we were seriously risking getting mauled, or worse, by whatever that dog-headed monster man was. I wanted to run away, but I didn't feel safe in the wilderness without Kobe, and I knew he wasn't safe without me. Especially if he was going to do dumb things like run towards monsters in a swamp. So I sort of tiptoed after him to hide where he had moved to. When I got there, he was fishing through his backpack for where he had stashed his old Kodak snapshot camera. I don't know if they make things like that anymore. It was a small little black plastic box that took pictures and had a built-in flash. At any rate, he couldn't find it, and he started whispering to me that I must have his camera. I knew for a fact that I did not, since I had only ever seen it one time. He never even took it out any other time. Either it was in his backpack, or he had mislaid it somewhere, but in neither case did it have anything to do with me. This notion didn't sit well with my friend, and soon we were in a whispering argument that got increasingly heated. One sign of the narcissism of many, including me and Kobe, is that we think that just because we're whispering, that means nobody can hear us. Similarly, Kobe and I thought that we were invisible because we were hiding behind that bush. Well, you aren't invisible if you're whispering loudly in an argument, as it turns out. It's also possible that we smelled enough for the creature to notice us that way as well. We were anything but invisible, and we came to understand that when we heard a kind of a shouting, somewhat related to barking, coming from the swamp. Both of us shut up, and both of us peeked out from behind that bush to get a glimpse of what that Dogman was doing. He was back down on all fours. He was running. He was running out of the water. He was running out of the water and toward me and Kobe. I remember feeling completely numb as we ran away. I couldn't feel the tips of my fingers, and after some time, I couldn't feel if I still had my backpack on either. I remember bouncing off trees hard and feeling no pain. I was never so scared before. It was so intense that it was an entirely new kind of experience to me. I saw no chance at all that we would both survive. I figured if we were lucky, only one of us would get taken by the giant dog, and that way the other one might survive as long as he abandoned his friend and kept running. So in other words, best case scenario was that I would only lose a good friend and not my own life. And that's all. There is a moment, or there was, just before I turned to run away from the Dogman swamp monster, in which I saw it from head to toe. It was just a second or two maximum, but I saw him make it to the shoreline and then stand up on his hind legs. I saw him from his dog feet to his dog legs to his massive humanoid chest, covered in slightly less fur than the rest of him. His front legs became arms when he stood upright, and when he held them back at his sides, he looked like a giant human wearing a dog head. In many descriptions of the Dogman, he is seen as svelte, muscular, but as thin as possible while being that muscular. Now this guy, while certainly not fat, was built out a bit. His waist was still the narrowest part of his physique, but it was wider than in your illustrations. Again, I don't mean to say the creature was fat, but it was wider, that's all. The Dogman's head looked like something that had died and been brought back to life. Maybe it was because it was soaking wet, coming out of the swamp. But this was not an attractive hound. It looked like a monster. It did not look like man's best friend, if you know what I mean. So we ran, and I was certain this would be my last time running. When you think it's the last time you're ever going to get to do something, it can take on an epic feel to you in that moment. I remembered every time I had run since I was very young. I remembered times I had fallen and skinned my knee, or tripped and fell headlong into the grass. I breathed in and out, and I pumped my legs, and I felt a kind of contentment as I mentally prepared myself for the end. But suddenly, we ran into and through a crowd of about 6 or 7 tourists, maybe 8. Possibly they were a family traveling together, I don't really know. Some of them had cameras around their necks, and Kobe shouted at one of them to take a picture of that. He pointed toward the Dogman, but then we both noticed the Dogman was no longer there. An uncomfortable silence ensued, as I realized these people now thought we were both insane. After looking back and forth silently, we just sort of walked away. So in the moment when we should have been feeling a sense of relief and even triumph that we had escaped the Dogman and lived through the incident, instead we felt a sense of embarrassment. There was no way we could explain our behavior to those people unless the Dogman showed up and chased them too. It was just one of those times when you have to man up and take the L, I suppose. So, we didn't get to measure the creature, obviously, but we agreed that the thing was a minimum of 10 feet tall. And when it stood most upright, it might have even been over 11. Usually the taller cryptids reported are from up north, and the shorter ones down in places like Arkansas and Florida. Pennsylvania is in between, so I don't suppose it makes much sense to me that it's the apparent home of the giant, aquatic, swamp Dogman. Welcome back, EP Nepomuceno. As big a hit as the Great Bambino, please join us in thanking Edwin Nepomuceno for making this episode possible. Edwin gets to see all our weekly secret, uncensored, scary Dogman stories, plus our over 25 hours of archived, uncensored stories for you to binge for over a full day. Since he's a $7 a month member, Edwin also gets occasional advanced previews and special treats. And so can you. Here's our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to fill in the deets. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.